225, 2024. Yeehaw! Alrighty, we got a nasty little shake. Everybody says it's the engine mounts, but I know it's not. And what I'm going to do here is a compression test. So first thing you got to do is pull the plug out, install your pressure tester, and yeah, unplug the coils. You don't want no spark. You don't want it to run. And we're looking for two things. We're looking for an intake restriction, or we're looking for a bent rod. And we'll go through this little test, and we're going to see, because we're going to watch that compression gauge right there when I crank this. Now we're looking for the first stroke volume and the total overall compression. Looks pretty good. Now, to do a volume test, you really should take the valve core out. But I think it had about 60 pounds on the first stroke. So we'll run it again. We're looking for intake volume per stroke. And the first stroke looks like it's about 35. Second stroke looks like it's about 75. Okay, and what does that mean? Well, it don't really mean a whole lot just yet. Because what we're going to talk about is what it could mean. Okay, we got 35, 40 pounds on the first stroke. And that's for that cylinder number one. Now here's what's going on. If you have an intake restriction, you're going to have low volume. Alright? Instead of having a 60 pound stroke, you're going to have a 10 or a 15 pound stroke. What we're going to do is we're going to comparison test. So we had like 130, 140 pounds of compression. So we're going to pull this one out, switch cylinders, and we're going to go down through all four of them cylinders, and we're going to verify that our intake volume is fairly even and that our overall total compression is fairly even. So if I go 140, 140, 140, and 110, what does that mean? Well, more than likely it means you got a bent rod. Somebody drowned it, bent the rod on it, and didn't blow the head gasket, or they put the head gasket on it and didn't change the bent rod. Okay, like I said, it's shaking. It's kind of limping. Not limping real bad. It's got a lot of power, and it's not a dead miss. And it goes into the intake restriction type thing. You could have, I don't know, something in your intake, like a rock or a sanding stone. I've seen sanding stones left in Elderbrox. So I had a Mustang come in. He was missing on one of the cylinders. I run this little test on it, and my stroke test come up at 10 pounds. 10 pounds of stroke. So it took it forever to pump up. So we finally pump up, but that wasn't enough volume to make the cylinder fire, so it had a dead miss. This one's just shaking. And a lot of times shaking could be a bent rod. Shaking could be an injector issue. Shaking could be a low volume intake issue, or on this particular engine, somehow they've got the bouncer shafts, they've got the crankshaft 180 degrees out, or one full revolution. I'm sorry, the crankshaft could be one revolution out, which puts the bouncer shafts 180 degrees out. So the bouncer shafts could be out of time on this because somebody put a head on it and got the crankshaft rotated one rotation, and it's out of time. So that's what we're chasing here. We're chasing a shake. Most obvious thing you want to check is to make sure your shake ain't from a bent rod and your shake ain't from a restricted intake. One of these could be restricted. Old mud dauber might have got up in there somehow and built him a big old mud dauber nest in there. I'm not sure, but this test will tell you. If you got low volume, intake restriction. If you got a bent rod, you have low overall compression that's very uneven to the other cylinders. Anyway, God bless in the 405. Hate to make them too long. Later.